Hello and welcome to Slayer Tera gameplay guide. For the sake of keeping this video short, this guide will focus on playing Slayer DPS. In PvE, I will be covering most of Slayer's skills, use skill priority change and general tips to be good at the class. We have a lot of stuff to cover, so let's get into it. First, let's briefly go over your skills. Combo attack. Combo attack is pretty much useless in PvE, you never use it for optimal gameplay. For too many reasons. It does no damage, it barely crits, and it's so slow. It may be good in PvP because the fit hits stagger other players, but since this guide is gonna cover only PvE aspect, then I recommend to never use it. Knockdown Strike. Knockdown Strike is the best filler for Slayer. While using it, it makes you immune to stagger or knockdown. It does good damage, plus it has 3 useful glyphs. First glyph is increase skill damage of whirlwind by 25% for 8 seconds. Second glyph is increase damage of the next overhand strike by 20%. Third glyph is 15% damage reduction while casting this skill. This glyph is pretty much useful when face stacking one-shot mechanics like Bahar waves. Whirlwind. Whirlwind is the main ability for Slayer due to how Slayer propulsion passive works. I'll get into the passive later. Anyways, Whirlwind is pretty useful because the skill itself does good damage plus what it gives you. The first thing you benefit from using Whirlwind is 10% damage on all your skills for 4 seconds. You gain 20 crit factor for 3 seconds due to EP system. Dash. Dash gives you 55% movement speed while in combat. You most likely won't need it in PvE. Evasive Roll. Evasive Roll is your main iframe skill. By iframing, I mean dodging boss attacks to prevent taking damage. Overhand Strike. Overhand Strike is your third or second best ability on Slayer. It pretty much can change to every other skill, it does 20% plus of your total damage contribution, and it has a big part of contributing into your propulsion passive. And it has a 70% chance to reset due to its only glyph, which can affect your gameplay. Leaping Strike. Leaping Strike is useful on dodging patterns like killing ground donuts or to position yourself. Heart Thrust. Heart Thrust is your core skill out of propulsion passive. The skill does so much damage, has a high chance to crit, and it has a fast cast time. And it has a very good passive that gives your skill damage based on your physical amplification. Stunning Backhand. Stunning Backhand it stuns the target for like 2 seconds, the last filler, and it doesn't do a lot of damage, and it doesn't crit, and it's slow. If you play properly, you will never need it. Stalling Kick. Stalling Kick is your last filler. It's pretty handy when you get caught out of position. It can be used to reposition yourself behind boss without forcing yourself to stop DPS. Fury Strike. Fury Strike is your third best skill as a filler. And it's faster, but it doesn't do good damage, so you want to keep it as your third option. Headlong Rush. Headlong Rush is one of the main core skills. It doesn't do damage itself, but it has a big part of contributing into propulsion. Due to its effect, it gives you like 16% attack speed on your next ability, which is gonna be 100% synchronized with your Whirlwind. I'm gonna get into this later. Overpower. Overpower is an active skill that you can toggle on when you log in. It costs mana over time, but gives you 33% damage on first hit on Whirlwind or Heart Thrust or Knockdown Strike every 4 seconds. Tenacity. Tenacity regenerates 900 mana and it makes you immune to take damage from attacks in 1 second, and it removes harmful effects excluding stuns. Due to a Thalif, I will get into Thalifs later. In Cold Blood. In Cold Blood is your main burn skill. It gives 15% damage to all your skills, plus 8% attack speed, plus 30% damage on overhand strike for 20 seconds. While the skill is active, you will benefit from no cooldown on overhand strike. Measured Slice. Measured Slice is your second or third main skill. It does 20% of your total damage contribution and it has a big part of contributing into your propulsion passive. Eviscerate. Eviscerate is a core skill, as it has big contribution on propulsion passive and it does good damage itself. Plus Eviscerate Glaives gives your second and third damage contribution skills a huge buff, which is 25% damage on both measured slice and overhand strikes for 8 seconds. Punishing Blow. Punishing Blow is your first main skill. It does a lot of damage, which is basically 25% plus total damage contribution, and it has a big role on your propulsion passive. Savage Strike. Savage Strike is the ultimate skill on Slayer due to its passives. It's either will make you a good Slayer or a bad one. So your main goal is to master the skill. When you use this skill, all your attacks considered back attacks for 5 seconds. It's pretty useful when you are out of position to prevent side hitting. The second passive you benefit from using Savage Strike is Speed Charging Unsheath. First card gives you 40% charging speed and the second card gives you 60%. The last passive is the very important one. It's hidden. We call it reverse chaining. By reverse chaining means you can do extraordinary chains that you cannot usually do. I'll make a part in the video later talking only about reverse chaining. Unsheath. Unsheath is a core skill on your burn. It has 3 charging phases. Every phase gives you 5% damage increase. Charging into your bleed gives you 15% total damage. It's not always worth to overcharge. Anyways, it does huge damage. You usually wanna synchronize it with In Cold Blood, Priest, Mystic, Lancer buffs and Dragons to get the most benefit from it. Otherwise, it's a waste because the skill has a big cooldown and can be reduced due to propulsion passive. Backstab. Backstab teleports you behind boss and works as an iframe too. It's pretty handy at start or if you get caught out of position. Distance Blade. Exhausting Blow. Those 2 skills are pretty much useless in PvE, so you will never need them. Next part is Slayer passive, which is the most interesting part to understand the class better. Merciless Leap. Knockdown Strike Boost. Whirlwind Intensity. A mostly PvP passive. Merciless Leap makes you do more damage to knock down targets, which is irrelevant against bosses. And KDS Boost and Whirlwind Intensity makes you do more damage to multiple targets, which has no effect on Tera endgame bosses, since you're gonna be fighting only one target. Icy Veins. Icy Veins makes you reset Whirlwind, Knockdown Strike and Hot Thrust when you use In Cold Blood, which is pretty much useful due to how Propulsion passive works. Propulsion. Propulsion is the most important passive on Slayer, and it's exactly what makes Slayer very hard and fun to play. Because of this passive, Slayer doesn't have a static rotation like Valkyries, so you will have to improvise and start prioritizing skills instead of using static rotation. Why? Because each skill on your 5-core skill resets each other. Let's get into more details. Each hit on Whirlwind reduces measured slice cooldown by 1.5 seconds, which is 3 seconds in total. Each crit on Eviscerate reduces measured slice cooldown by 1.5 seconds. Remember, each crit, not hit. Each hit on Eviscerate reduces Whirlwind cooldown by 2 seconds. Each hit on Overhand Strike reduces Whirlwind cooldown by 2 seconds. Alright, the second passive is Blade Master. Blade Master is pretty much Propulsion V2, which makes your measured slice reduce Punishing Blow by 2 seconds on successful hit, and Punishing Blow reduces Unsheath cooldown by 5 seconds. Next passive is Overhand Strike Focus. Overhand Strike Focus gives you 30% total damage on all your skills. How? The first hit on Overhand Strike will give you 20% damage and it stacks 5 times. Each hit on Overhand Strikes give you 2% more damage, which means 10% more. You will lose the stacks if you don't use Overhand Strikes in 7 seconds. Next passive is Strong Blade. Your physical resistance ignore is increased based on 4% of your physical amplification. Energy Rush. Energy Rush, whenever you use In Cold Blood, you gain 5% crit chance plus 5% attack speed on every use of Overhand Strike. Stacks up to 5 times, which means 25% attack speed and 25% crit chance. Glyphs and Talips. For PvE glyphs, there is pretty much only one best build page that you will need, so you can pause the video and copy them. For the last glyph, which is Savage Strike glyph, you get this in Passer when you reach level 70. Talips are skill advancement and skill optimization. Those are pretty much mandatory, you need them at max because they give your character a huge damage difference. First skill optimization, you get it when you reach level 66. Gives you at max level 20 power plus 10% more damage on whirlwind. Second skill optimization, you get it when you reach level 68. It gives your character 40 crit factor increase and a very good passive which is 10% chance to hit double amount of damage on overhand strike, which can be a really huge buff if you're lucky. For the last skill optimization, you get it when you reach level 70. It gives your character overall 20 endurance and 15% damage on your main skill, which is punishing blow. For skill optimizations, there is only two options in PvE. You want tenacity insight because it's pretty useful in PvE. It becomes your best iframe. You can use it to dodge attacks in between other skills without stopping their chains. For the second one is in cold blood focus. It gives you 5 seconds more uptime on your burn skill plus 10% more damage on overhand strike while the skill is active. EP or talent system. For this there is a mandatory options that you have to get first. You want to take Mighty attack because it gives you permanent 23 power. Second option is Mighty defense. Gives you 23 permanent endurance. Then you want whirlwind velocity for obvious reasons. It gives you 15% attack speed on your main skill. After that you want whirlwind critical pummel. It gives you 20 crit factor in 3 seconds when you use the skill. The next option is overhand strike force and extra force. While in cold blood active, using overhand strike has 60% chance to give you 5 power, stack up 5 times, which is equal to 25 power in total and it has a 6.5 second uptime. After that you want to take Eviscerate counter. It gives you permacrit power buff to the skill, which is pretty nice quality of life buff. The secondary options are Headlong Rush amplification, Styling Kick velocity and chain speed. Since we went all over the things that you need to know about Slayer, let's see how you can apply every information you got from the previous parts in actual gameplay. Alright, when playing Slayer, there are a lot of stuff you have to pay attention to. If you don't execute them very carefully, you may end up doing no damage. The first thing that you need to pay attention to are passives, followed by skill glaives, then priorities on your skills and max hit on them. Your first priority should be punishing blow, then measured slice or overhand strike. Now you have to keep in mind that most of Slayer DPS comes from burn phases. By burn phases I mean when boss is enraged and you have all the buffs active, such as healer buffs, tank buffs, and your main burn skill which is in cold blood plus bruise. When you are out of burn phase, you want to keep your DPS as high as possible, which is the hardest part. So learning how to play out of burn phase is the key. To learn how to play in both phases you need to master propulsion passive first. To do that, the best thing you can do is spending some time in training ground. Anyways, in this case you want as much hits as possible on punishing blow. Thanks to propulsion passive you can reduce the cooldown of punishing blow by hitting other skills. Let's get into more details. Remember in the passive spot, measured slice reduces the cooldown of punishing blow by 2 seconds. To get more hits on punishing blow you have to get more hits on measured slice, and to get more hits on measured slice you have to get more hits on whirlwind and eviscerate. Because whirlwind and eviscerate reduces the cooldown of measured slice by 1.5 seconds. That's why your main focus is using whirlwind. And to reduce the whirlwind cooldown you have to use more overhand strike and more eviscerate. Alright, now let's talk about gameplay when using in cold blood and what you have to pay attention to. Your main focus when burning with in cold blood is to stack all the passives as fast as possible. Overhand strike focus, which is 30% damage increase, energy rush, which is 25% chance to crit and 25% attack speed. Overhand strike force gives you additional 25 power. Alright, to do that you have to use as much overhand strike as possible and as fast as possible. Because you need 6 hits on overhand strike to stack overhand strike focus and 5 hits to stack energy rush, and most likely 5 stacks on overhand strike force because the EP has 60 chance to apply. Luckily overhand strike has no cooldown during the burn phase. After stacking all your passives, you want to immediately use Unsheath when you see the dragon buffs. Alright, your main goal in ICB is to use a lot of overhand strike. It does a lot of damage because the skill gets huge damage increase while In Cold Blood is active. It gets 55% from ICB itself and 10% chance to hit double damage on it from Taliev. Anyways, your main goal in ICB is not only hitting a lot of overhand strike, but also hitting a lot of other skills as well, such as Punishing Blow, Measured Slice, Whirlwind, Eviscerate, and Hard Thrust. You want to use a lot of Punishing Blow and Measured Slice because they do a lot of damage. You want to use Whirlwind for cooldown reset and for the 10% damage on all your skills glaive. You want to use Eviscerate for cooldown reset but mainly for the 25% damage on Measured Slice and the overhand strike glaive. And you want to use Hard Thrust because the skill does so much damage plus the ignore passive you get from using the skills for 4 seconds. Alright, there is some tricks you need to know before using your burn skill. You want to always use Whirlwind before popping In Cold Blood, because Whirlwind gives 10% damage to all your skills for 4 seconds, and you get a free reset on Whirlwind when you use In Cold Blood. You want to always use Knockdown Strike after using In Cold Blood to cancel the cast animation. Now let's talk about general tricks. When Measured Slice is up, don't use Whirlwind Overhand Strike Measured Slice. Use Hard Thrust Overhand Strike Measured Slice instead, so you don't waste the cooldown reset that Whirlwind gives you. Always use Punishing Blow before Measured Slice if both skills are up, because Measured Slice reduces Punishing Blow cooldown by 2 seconds. Alright, your starters should be always on this order: Headlong Rush followed by Whirlwind. Use Hard Thrust if Whirlwind is on cooldown. Use Knockdown Strike if Whirlwind and Hard Thrust are on cooldown. Use Fury Strike if Whirlwind and Hard Thrust and KDS are on cooldown. General advices: pay attention to Overhand Strike focus. It's 30% damage increase. You will lose the stacks if you don't hit Overhand Strike for the next 7 seconds, and it takes a lot of time to restack. Pay attention to Whirlwind Glaive, which is 10% damage. It should be always up if you play properly. Also pay attention to Eviscerate Glaive. It's 25% damage glaive on Measured Slice and Overhand Strike. It should be 100% uptime if you play properly. Now let's talk about the ultimate skill, which is Sephee Strike. As I said, using Sephee Strike is up to your improvisation. For me in ICB, I use Sephee Strike to hit more overhand strike and for fast chains on Whirlwind. Out of ICB, I use Sephee Strike to close the cooldown gap if I use Whirlwind and my Measured Slice still didn't come up from cooldown. Anyways, as I mentioned before, Sephee Strike has a hidden passive for 1 second that allows you to do some interesting chains. When you use Sephee Strike, if you can fit whatever skills in 1 second, they will chain without hard casting. Alright, here is some possible chains when using Sephee Strike. Sephee Strike, Double Overhand Strike, Whirlwind. This chain will only work if you have a lot of attack speed. Most likely won't work out of ICB, it's very useful to stack passives at start. Sephee Strike, Overhand Strike, Whirlwind. This chain is useful out of ICB. Sephee Strike, Double Overhand Strike. This chain is pretty handy to reset Whirlwind. Sephee Strike, Overhand Strike, Measured Slice, Overhand Strike. This chain is only possible in ICB. Sephee Strike, Overhand Strike, Punishing Blow, Overhand Strike. This chain is only possible in ICB too. Sephee Strike, Overhand Strike, Unsheath, Overhand Strike. This chain is possible in both ICB and out of ICB. You can also use Sephee Strike, Hard Thrust, Whirlwind if your Overhand Strike is on cooldown. Or Sephee Strike, Knockdown Strike, Whirlwind if your Overhand Strike and Hard Thrust is on cooldown. Or you can use Sephee Strike, Knockdown Strike, Hard Thrust if your Overhand Strike and Whirlwind is on cooldown. That's pretty much it for this video. A special thanks to Slayer Discord people, and I wanna thank ayutamis for motivating me doing this guide, and for doing big damage and parcel logs for my calculations. And a special thanks also to Miriam and Ron, the Mad Gods. Because of them I started Theory Crafting Slayer and understand the class even more. And a special thanks to Power of YOLO for working with me on the damage calculator. Thank you guys for watching.